Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Aaron Thormundson, and I will be doing a refutation on Beatrice's claim, which is a lack of conservation for endangered species puts our survival into question. She has three supporting claims. Firstly, we do not know the consequences, the ecological consequences of this extinction. Secondly, we rely on animals for food. And thirdly, we are unsure of the economic consequences of this extinction. A response to her first claim, that we don't know the ecological consequences of this extinction, frankly, you cannot make that claim. You cannot say that because we do not know something, this must be a problem. In fact, it is as good an argument that it should occur, that we should allow these animals to go extinct because we don't know, as is that we shouldn't allow it to happen. A question mark is really just an unknown fact. In this same section, she goes on to start discussing invasive species, but never relates the invasive species back to what the original claim was, the original claim, and also how it's relevant to how it's going to affect humanity's ability to survive. She also, within her discussion on invasive species, doesn't bring up the fact that some invasive species are actually helpful to the environment. For example, Wired Science writes that honeybees are not native to North America, but are completely essential to our agricultural and pollination systems. And in fact, their slow disappearance is considered a problem, and the people are trying to stop that, although they are a non-native invasive species. Her second claim is that we rely on animals for food and for survival, which is absolutely true. We, of course, need animals to eat. The problem is that no one is saying that there will be a complete loss in animals. We're not saying that all animals are going to go extinct. And frankly, the correlation that a loss in endangered species and our loss in our ability to find animals to eat is factually inaccurate. According to the World Watch Institute, in the last 40 years, there's been a 169% increase in livestock raising globally. While the World Wildlife Fund reports that in the last 40 years, there's been over a 50% decrease in the amount of wildlife. So as endangered species and other wildlife tend to decrease over the last 40 years, we've been able to, in fact, raise and grow more food, which shows that there is, in fact, almost an opposite correlation between endangered species and our ability to eat. Finally, she states within this same second claim that a loss of plants and animals would mean a loss in air and water quality, which once again is an over-exaggeration of what she's saying. It does not relate back to the fact that we're talking about a loss of endangered species. This assumes a complete loss in all plants and animals, which isn't what the original claim was. Her third claim is that we're unsure of the economic consequences, which, like the original first claim, is a claim based off of us not knowing something, which in and of itself isn't an argument. Within this claim, she states a fact that a loss of the ecosystem provides $33 trillion to our economy, which is absolutely true, but we're not discussing a complete loss of the ecosystem. In fact, if there was a complete loss of the ecosystem, there would be no global output, there would be no more money being made, we would all die. We need plants for oxygen, food, and water cleaning, and so on. But that isn't what the argument is. It does not relate back to the fact that we're discussing endangered species, not species across the world. Her final example within this section is that in Thailand, natural mangroves are found to be more profitable per hectare than the shrimping industry, which in Thailand, the shrimping industry is massive. And in fact, over the last 40 years, there's been a movement to tear out mangroves to help grow shrimp aquaculturally. The problem is, I researched this fact, as this fact wasn't inside the bibliography, and didn't find any substantial proof for it. In fact, in the last 10 years, there's been a large movement to have mangroves growing alongside shrimp in an aquaponic system, which shows that differentiating the two agricultural systems isn't accurate. You can have them both being productive in the same area. So in conclusion, this argument, the argument that Beatrice makes, does not prove her original claim that a loss in endangered species would affect our ability to survive. Thank you.
All right, the structural stuff's all good. On the first point, I think you've got an interesting point here. The lack of knowledge goes both directions. It could potentially be the other direction, and that's a reasonable point to make, especially with some of the later evidence that you provide on the second point. You do have a piece of information about the non-native species that are invasive, and you've got a good example of a positive impact that it has. So that kind of reinforces the point you're talking about. If we'd said 400 years ago, we wouldn't have known what the impact of introducing a non-native species like the honeybee into the North American continent would be. Here's the positive consequence, just like the advocate suggesting there's a negative consequence. I don't remember that the advocate actually said anything more specific than, well, we sometimes get these invasive species, but that's about as far as it goes. And by the way, the invasive species, are they the ones that are causing the endangerment of the other species? I don't remember that there was an argument from either position that this happens or it doesn't happen, that it threatens the species. It does seem like that would be a natural outcome, not because they're competing with each other perhaps, but I'm not sure that they can't also survive in conjunction with one another. And I think your example of honeybee might be a good illustration of that point. On the second point, you basically say that her claim is hyperbole, that it's not likely that all animals are going to disappear. I think that's a reasonable argument. I thought that you had good evidence that suggested, look, we have lost species, we have had a decline in the amount of wildlife, but we have an increase in the amount of production of food materials, so this doesn't really seem to make sense at all. It's counterintuitive on that particular point. Okay, that works pretty well. And on the air and water quality, you in essence say that her position assumes a complete decline in all of these ecosystems, in which case we don't have to worry about it, we'll be dead at that point. And I thought that that was a reasonable point to make as well. And there's not really a demonstration that that's where we're going there. On the third point, that's kind of the same argument that you're making there. The shrimping issue versus the mangroves would be nice if you'd cited the sources on that particular point. That would make it a little bit more applicable. So I think you challenged the premise of the advocate's argument, challenged with some good counterexamples on a couple of points, and point out especially some good arguments about the reasoning process that the advocate is making. And that's effective. All right. Thank you.